But in the lead up to this message, I had no idea I was going to be preaching a few weeks ago. And through the week, just to bring you on the journey, I felt the Lord speak to me and say, "You're going to preach before the year finishes," which was about 3 weeks ago. So as soon as I heard that, I'm like, okay, what do you want to say? And he gave me a small bit of what he wanted to share, which was a little bit of my story. But in that, I was like, all right, Lord, then you do it. And within a few days, there goes an email from Gary. And surely enough, asking if either myself or Paige would preach. And Paige was already on for the prayer time and the ministry time this morning, so thus it fell with me. And in that, you can imagine it felt quite good, going, yep, well, the Lord's spoken. So preparation for this morning has been very different than the last time I spoke, that's for sure. As I know the Lord wants to speak to some people here, and being sensitive to allow him the space and allow him to move. This isn't about us. This isn't about how good we are or anything like that. It's about what he wants to do. And he uses his people for that. Why? I don't know, but he does. So with that, I've got one scripture that we're going to talk on, and then I want to share a bit of my story and what the Lord's done in my life with you. But the story that I want to share is actually about the walls of Jericho, which a lot of you may know this story. It's in Joshua. It's nice. I've got a nice short segment for you. But Joshua 6, 1 to 5. In the New King James I'll be reading, if anyone wants to follow along. I don't have it on the screens. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall all go around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass, when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him." And I read only that segment of where the Lord spoke. But, as we know, that then happened. They then followed the Lord's instructions. They followed that one word that the Lord gave. And from that, victory was given to them. I can imagine it would have felt pretty weird walking around walls and then shouting at them and watching them fall. Even just bringing yourself to actually shout at a wall and blow a trumpet at it thinking you're going to win a war. Like, I don't know about you, but that's not what I have in my head when it comes to a war. But they heard the Lord. They took him at his word. One word from him can change absolutely everything. Absolutely everything, in ways that we cannot comprehend. That's awesome. That's how we need to be living, where when the Lord speaks something, we go, yeah, that's his word. And we actually take it and we exercise it. And with our faith, we yell at that wall and we watch it fall. Now, I want to talk about the time that Lord encountered me. And this has come up a few times in the last 3 weeks. A little while ago, it was when Tom preached on knowing God and what it means to actually know God. Sarah spoke on restoration to God. And Gary spoke last week on the yes to Jesus and what our yes is to Jesus. So for me, dating back a long while. I've got my beautiful mother here this morning as well, which she plays a big part in this story. Grew up the youngest of four, and I'm going to give a pretty short version of this because I really want to focus in on when the Lord encountered me. Grew up the youngest of four. My eldest brother, Nathan, he was 9 years older than me. Then my sister, Naomi, 7, and my brother, Sam, 2. So we had beautiful mum, and then we had dad, and when I was about 6 or 7-ish, give or take, mum and dad separated, and all us kids went with mum, and we stayed with mum, and we'd see dad here or there on the weekends and whatnot. Now, mum, our whole life, has been the most faith-filled, incredible Christian. She runs circles around anyone that I know when it comes to faith in the Lord and standing on him, and when he speaks, she'll shout at a wall for however long she needs to shout at a wall. And I don't say that sarcastically. That's the woman that she is. Now, for me, I never really knew God because we'd have great teaching from mum, and she worked so hard. She worked 7 days a week to put us through Christian schooling, and she did everything she could, but it meant we weren't at church on Sundays because she'd be doing markets, running her own businesses, doing everything she can to then put us through Christian schooling. So she knew that we were hearing about Jesus in our week to week. Now, fast forwarding a lot, it wasn't until 2010. And in 2010, in February, everything changed for our family when we had police knock on our door and we had the news that my eldest brother Nathan had been killed overseas. Now, he was an airline hostess, and a tragedy happened over there. And I'm not going to go into all the details on that part of it because I don't believe that's what the Lord wants to do today. But nonetheless, I'm sure you can imagine that shook us. And for me personally, it shook me to my very core. I was 15 at the time, and he was pretty much my dad. He very much took on that role, even though he wasn't probably the best role model in a lot of ways. He was at the same time because he was the closest thing that I had to having a father in the house. And, we'd see dad on weekends and love my father to pieces, but it was different. Now, when this happened, it shook my world, and I very much went into a very dark stage of life. I didn't really know where I was going to go, what I was going to do, how I was going to move past, and being a 15-year-old, talking wasn't really something I was good at. And in all of that, we were all going through everything ourselves. And it started to get to the point where things were getting really dark for me, and I was having a lot of horrible thoughts, and I was ready to pretty much throw in the towel. And Mum and I had started seeing a grief counsellor, Christian grief counsellor, and we had been a few times, wasn't really seeing much progress, and then this was the day that the Lord encountered me, and we pulled up into our side street in the city. Beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. We pulled up. Mum went in for her session, and I would sit in the car because I hated the waiting room. It was weird and eerie, and I just preferred to sit in the car in my comfort. So anyway, sat in the car, and I essentially just cried out to God. And I said, Lord, if you're real, then you've got to show yourself, otherwise I'm done. I don't want a bar of this life anymore. That's it. And I leant back in my seat and looked over to the rear view driver's side mirror. And I saw a large cluster of black clouds in the sky. And I turned around to see if they were there, and they were not. I could see the same spot between a tree and between a building, and they were not there. And as I began to look at these clouds in the mirror, I began to see them take shape of the world of darkness. As real as I look at all of your faces, as real as I look at my own hand or a TV or any object, they began to show me all these images of the world of darkness. And I don't have to go into details on that side. And I was filled with the most fear I've ever felt in my life. I was shaking. I was completely distraught, had tears, crying snot tears. It was a mess. And I cried out and I said, God, why are you showing me this? I asked. And after a few moments, I looked back at them, and the clouds were no longer black, but they were a white cluster of clouds. And I looked again to see them in the sky, and I couldn't see them. And as I looked at them, they began to take shape of how I would see God the Father. And both of his hands were raised like this, with a gap in the center. And inside of that gap was all the storm clouds. And I hear the Lord's voice every day. I talk to him every single day. To this day, I have never heard his voice like this. It was the audible, booming, shake you to your core voice that we think and hear about through Scripture. And he said to me, I am your heavenly and your earthly Father. I will never leave you nor forsake you and carry you through every trial of life. And in that moment, everything left me. Everything left my body. The thoughts, this extreme grief, the depression, the shaking, the tears, everything left. And I was filled with complete joy. And I said back to the Lord, then I will serve you. And before I even said a word to Mum, I got out the car. Hadn't said a word to her, she just said, what happened? And I said, what do you mean? In the 15-year-old kind of way of, haha. And she said I was physically glowing and she could see the presence of God radiating off my skin. Everything was different about me. Everything. And I said, I'll tell you when I get out. Went in for my session, told my grief counsellor, I think her jaw fell to the floor and then never saw her again. Told Mum. And from that day, everything's just continued. There's a lot in the mix. There's a lot still going. There's a lot of this story that hasn't finished. But nonetheless, one encounter with God changed absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. My life completely changed. And I don't know what your 2023 has been like. I don't know what this year has held for you. I don't know if it's been an easy year. I don't know if it's been the most difficult year that you've had. But I know what my 2010 was like. I know how that started. And I know what changed it. And what changed it was a word from the Lord and an encounter with the Lord. It took him to speak and me to take him at his word and scream at the wall and watch everything change. Watch everything of my life completely change for the better. And this morning, that's really my cry for you. Is I don't know what you've experienced this year. I don't know how hard it's been. If you've had words from the Lord, if you haven't. If life has just thrown you a curveball and it hasn't been easy, it happens. It really does. But what I do know is he changes everything. And the year's not over yet. Might seem like it is, but the year is not over yet. We still have time. More than that, the Lord still has time. And this morning, that's really what we feel on our hearts, is to open space. To open space for him to encounter us. I know that he saved me that day, that he restored me. Just as Sarah spoke on restoration, he restored me from complete brokenness to be glorified in him. And yeah, I'm still broken. I'm still sinful. I ain't perfect, that's for sure. Ask Paige. But nonetheless, through him, he makes things so beautiful, and he can use anyone. And he wants to use us. He wants to encounter us, and he wants to speak to us. He wants to give you words that will change your life. Words that will make you go from walking the wrong direction and walk full on for him. He wants to encounter us. He wants us to experience the glory of him, the majesty of him. And I know I'm very, very privileged to have had the experience that I had. And still to this day, as I said earlier, nothing has ever come close to that. Ever. I've never heard his voice the same, have never experienced anything like that before. But I know that one encounter, that's where I'm going. I'm going to follow him. I'm going to pursue him my whole life. And I know he wants that for each and every one of us.